During the meeting, my husband, the CEO, threw his pen on the floor and said, "Pick it up." Everyone laughed. I felt my face burn, but I stayed quiet. That night, I told him, "I'm done. Don't ever come near me again." By midnight, his company crashed, his phone filled with 53 missed calls, and his pride was gone. Pick it up. My husband said those words in front of his entire executive team. I was sitting at the far end of the boardroom table. Nathan was at the other end giving his presentation. His pen fell off the table, rolled across the floor, and stopped right in front of my feet. He looked at me. "Pick it up," he said. Not, "Could you?" Not, "Please." Just a command. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories of resilience and reclaiming power. If you believe that everyone deserves respect and recognition for their contributions, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more people who need to hear this. Now, let's see how this unfolds. Like I was his secretary. Like I was the cleaning lady. Like I was anyone but his wife. I felt everyone's eyes on me. Robert, the CFO. Olivia, the VP. Tyler from marketing. Chloe, his assistant. All of them watching. All of them waiting to see what I would do. The room was silent. Then Nathan said it again, louder this time. "Sarah, pick it up." Someone laughed. I don't know who started it, but then they were all laughing. Olivia covered her mouth. Robert shook his head, grinning. Tyler actually chuckled into his coffee. They were laughing at me. My face burned. My hand shook. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I bent down. I picked up the pen. I walked to his end of the table. I placed it in front of him. "There you go," I said quietly. Nathan took it without even looking at me. He went back to his presentation like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just humiliated me in front of everyone. But I made a decision right then. That night, I told him, "I'm done. Don't ever come near me again." By midnight, his company started crashing, his phone filled with 53 missed calls. His pride was gone. This is the story of how one pen destroyed everything. I need to tell you how I became that woman. The woman sitting at the end of the table, the woman who picked up the pen. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 40 years old. I've been married to Nathan for 6 years. 6 years of slowly disappearing. We lived in a penthouse apartment in Chicago, 23rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The kind of place people see in magazines and think, "That must be nice." It wasn't nice. It was lonely. Every morning, I'd wake up at 6 cow. Nathan would already be in the shower. By the time I got dressed, he'd be gone. No goodbye, no kiss. Sometimes not even a text. I'd stand at those big windows with my coffee, watching the city wake up, watching other people start their days. And I'd wonder when exactly I stopped being Sarah and became Mrs. Nathan Mitchell. I used to have my own life, my own job, my own identity. I was a financial consultant in Seattle. I was good at it. Really good. I helped small businesses reorganize their finances. I found investors. I created growth strategies. I had clients who trusted me, who respected me, who saw me as someone competent and valuable. Then I met Nathan. It was 7 years ago, a real estate conference in Seattle. He was giving a presentation about development opportunities in the Pacific Northwest. He was confident, charming, magnetic in that way some people are. After his talk, we ended up at the hotel bar. He bought me a drink. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about his company, Mitchell Dynamics, about his vision to build residential and commercial properties across the West Coast, about how he wanted to create something that mattered. But he also told me his finances were a mess, that he was passionate about development but terrible with numbers, that he needed someone who understood the business side. "I need a partner," he said that night. "Someone who gets it." someone smart. He made me feel seen, important, needed. We started dating a month later. He'd drive up to Seattle on weekends. We'd have dinner, walk along Elliott Bay, talk about the future, our future. He asked me to marry me 10 months after we met. Small ceremony, just family and a few close friends. I didn't want anything big. I just wanted him. Wanted the partnership he promised. "We'll build this together," Nathan said on our wedding night. We were in our hotel room. He was holding both my hands, looking right into my eyes. "Everything I do, you're part of it. We're a team now. Always." I believed him. For the first 2 years, it felt true. I moved to Chicago, started working with Nathan full-time on Mitchell Dynamics. The company was struggling when I came in. Debts everywhere, poor cash flow, no real financial strategy. I fixed it. I restructured the entire accounting system, identified areas where money was being wasted, created new revenue projections, built financial models that actually made sense. I also introduced Nathan to people, important people. Thomas Riley was a venture capitalist I'd worked with in Seattle. He specialized in real estate investments. I convinced him to meet with Nathan. 3 months later, Thomas committed $25 million to Mitchell Dynamics. That money funded Nathan's first major expansion. Then there was Diane Grant. She was a city planner I'd met at a conference. Smart, connected. She had relationships with every municipal office that mattered. I introduced her to Nathan over dinner. He liked her. More importantly, she trusted me. 6 months later, when Nathan needed permits fast-tracked for a development project, Diane made it happen. I also found a tax strategy that saved the company $4.7 million. It was completely legal, just a loophole that most people didn't know about. I found it. I implemented it. I saved Nathan's company. But slowly, things changed. At first, Nathan would credit me. "Sarah figured this out," he'd say in meetings. "She's the brains behind this." Then it became we. We restructured the finances. We found the right investors. Eventually, it just became I. I turned this company around. I built these relationships. I created this strategy. My name disappeared. I became Nathan's wife. Not Sarah. Not the financial consultant who saved his company. Just the wife, the accessory, the woman standing next to him at charity galas and investor dinners. And somewhere along the way, I stopped correcting people, stopped reminding Nathan of what I'd done. I told myself it didn't matter, that we were a team, that his success was our success. But it mattered. Those Tuesday morning meetings were the worst. Quarterly board reviews. Nathan insisted, "You attend every single one. It's important for you to be there." He'd say, "Investors like seeing stability. They want to know I'm grounded, that I have support at home." So, every 3 months, I'd sit at that boardroom table, far end, close to the door, in whatever dress Nathan had picked out for me the night before. "Wear the navy one," he'd say, or, "The gray looks more professional." I stopped choosing my own clothes. The executives barely acknowledged me. Robert Ellis, the CFO, had been with Nathan for 4 years. He was cold, efficient. He spoke only in numbers and projections. He looked at me like I was furniture, something that existed but didn't really matter. Olivia Reed was worse. She was the VP of Acquisitions. 34 years old, ambitious, ruthless. She'd smile at me sometimes, but it never reached her eyes. She looked at me like I was wasting a seat, like I was taking up space that could have gone to someone important. Tyler Brooks ran marketing. He was fine, harmless mostly. He spent more time on his phone than in actual meetings. He'd nod politely when I walked in, then forget I existed. And then there was Chloe, Nathan's assistant, 24 years old, blonde, always perfectly dressed. She laughed at all of Nathan's jokes, stayed late whenever he asked, looked at him like he was some kind of genius. I used to feel sorry for her. Now I just felt exhausted. That Tuesday started like every other. I woke up at 6 cow. Nathan was already gone. I made coffee, got dressed in the gray suit Nathan had left on my side of the closet, took a car service downtown to his office building. The receptionist smiled when I walked in. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell." I smiled back. I always smiled back. I took the elevator to the 14th floor. The boardroom was already full when I arrived. Robert was reading through documents. Olivia was on her phone. Tyler was talking to Chloe about some social media campaign. Nathan was at the head of the table, setting up his laptop for the presentation. He glanced at me when I walked in. Just a quick glance. No smile, no greeting. I sat down in my usual spot, far end of the table, closest to the door. Nathan started his presentation at 9 Huas exactly. He always started exactly on time. He talked about quarterly profits, about new development projects in Denver and Phoenix, about market expansion opportunities. His voice was confident, smooth, the voice of someone who believed every word he was saying. He clicked through slides, numbers, charts, growth projections. I'd built those projections. I'd calculated every number on those slides. But Nathan presented them like they were his. An investor on the video call asked a question. "Nathan, can you talk about the financial restructuring from 2 years ago that really turned the company around?" Nathan smiled, that confident smile he used with investors. "That was all me," he said. "I identified the core problems, implemented solutions, built the relationships that mattered." He didn't look at me, didn't mention my name, didn't acknowledge that I was the one who'd done all of it. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, watching him take credit for my work, and something inside me cracked. Not broke, just like glass with a fracture running through it, still intact, but barely holding together. That's when his pen fell off the table. The pen was expensive. Nathan had bought it in Switzerland 2 years ago during a business trip. He told me it cost $3,000 for a pen. I watched it roll off the table in what felt like slow motion. It tumbled through the air, hit the carpet with a soft sound, then rolled across the floor in a perfect straight line. It stopped directly in front of my feet. The room went completely quiet. Not the comfortable kind of quiet. Not the thoughtful pause that happens during presentations. This was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring, the kind where everyone stops breathing because something unexpected just happened and nobody knows what comes next. Nathan's eyes followed the pen's path. Then they landed on me. Not with love, not with the warmth I used to see in them years ago, not even with basic acknowledgement that I was his wife, his partner, the person he'd promised to build a life with. He looked at me with expectation, like I was staff, like I existed solely to serve him. "Pick it up," he said. 2 words, just 2 simple words. But the way he said them made my stomach drop. Casual, dismissive, like he was talking to someone whose job it was to clean up after him. I stared at him. This was my husband, the man I'd been married to for 6 years. The man who'd once held my hands and told me we were partners. The man who now sat at the other end of this long table, treating me like I was invisible until he needed something. The silence stretched. It felt like hours, but was probably only a few seconds. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I heard someone clear their throat. Olivia was watching us. I could see her in my peripheral vision. She had this look on her face, amused, like she was watching something entertaining unfold. Nathan's expression didn't change. He just kept looking at me, waiting. Then he said it again, Louder this time. "Sarah, the pen. Pick it up." And someone laughed. I don't know who started it. Maybe Olivia, maybe Robert. But once one person laughed, the rest followed. It wasn't nervous laughter. It wasn't the kind of laughter that tries to ease tension or smooth over an awkward moment. This was genuine amusement. They thought this was funny. They thought I was funny. Olivia covered her mouth with her hand, but I could see her shoulders shaking. She was trying not to laugh too hard, trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism, but she was laughing at me. Robert shook his head. He had this grin on his face like he'd just witnessed something ridiculous and couldn't quite believe it. Tyler looked down at his coffee cup, but I saw the smile. He was trying to hide it, but it was there. And Chloe, Nathan's assistant, let out this high-pitched giggle. It cut through the room like a sharp noise. She immediately put her hand over her mouth, embarrassed that she'd laughed out loud. But the damage was done. They were all laughing at me. My face felt like it was on fire. Heat crawled up my neck, spread across my cheeks. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. My hands were shaking. I clenched them together in my lap, digging my fingernails into my palms to stop the trembling. Every instinct I had screamed at me to do something. Stand up. Walk out. Tell Nathan exactly what I thought of him. Throw that stupid expensive pen across the room and watch him scramble to pick it up himself. But I didn't do any of those things. I knew Nathan. I knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted me to react. He wanted me to get emotional, to make a scene, to give him ammunition he could use later. He'd tell people I was unstable, irrational, couldn't handle pressure. He'd use it as proof that I didn't belong in these meetings, that I wasn't professional enough for his world. So I didn't give him that. I smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, polite one, the kind I'd perfected over 6 years of being Mrs. Nathan Mitchell. I stood up slowly, calmly. I walked around my chair, bent down, and picked up the pen. It was heavy. The metal felt expensive in my hand. I walked the length of the boardroom, past Robert, past Olivia, past Tyler and Chloe, all the way to Nathan's end of the table. I placed the pen gently in front of him. "There you go," I said quietly. Nathan picked up the pen. He didn't look at me, didn't say thank you, didn't acknowledge what had just happened at all. He just went right back to his presentation, clicked to the next slide, started talking about projected revenue for the next quarter like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just humiliated me in front of his entire executive team, like this was perfectly normal behavior. I walked back to my seat, sat down, folded my hands in my lap, but something had changed. Something inside me that had been held together by hope and denial, and the memory of who Nathan used to be had finally broken. Not shattered into pieces, just broken free. Like a chain snapping, like a door unlocking. And suddenly, I could see everything clearly. For 6 years, I'd been managing Nathan's life, organizing his schedule, screening his calls, editing his speeches, making sure his world ran smoothly so he could stand in front of rooms like this and look brilliant. I'd introduced him to Thomas Riley. Thomas was a venture capitalist I'd worked with in Seattle. I'd convinced him to meet with Nathan. I'd prepared Nathan for that meeting, coached him on what to say, helped him put together the pitch that eventually secured $25 million in funding. That money had saved Mitchell Dynamics. That money had funded Nathan's expansion into Denver and Phoenix. That money had made Nathan look like a genius to his board and his investors. But it was my relationship with Thomas that made it happen. My credibility, my reputation. And I'd connected Nathan with Diane Grant. Diane was a city planner I'd met at a conference 3 years ago. She had connections in every municipal office that mattered. When Nathan needed permits fast-tracked, when he needed zoning approvals, When he needed someone who could navigate bureaucracy, I'd called Diane. She'd helped him because she trusted me, not because she believed in Nathan, but because she believed in me. I'd also found the tax loophole that saved Mitchell Dynamics $4.7 million. I'd spent weeks researching tax code, consulting with specialists, building a strategy that was completely legal but that most companies never found. Nathan had presented that strategy to the board like it was his own brilliant discovery. He'd taken full credit, and nobody had questioned it. But Nathan's name was on the company. Nathan's face was in the business magazines. Nathan got invited to give talks at conferences about building successful companies. And I was just the woman who picked up his pen. I sat through the rest of that meeting in silence. Nathan finished his presentation. The board members on the video call asked questions. Nathan answered them confidently. Everyone nodded along. When the meeting finally ended, people started gathering their things, closing laptops, checking phones, standing up, and stretching. Nathan was talking to Robert about something, some issue with a contractor in Phoenix. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge I was still in the room. I stood up, picked up my bag, walked out. Nobody said goodbye. The ride home was silent. Nathan drove, one hand on the steering wheel, the other holding his phone. He was scrolling through emails, responding to messages, completely focused on his screen. I sat in the passenger seat and stared out the window. Watched the city go by. All those buildings, all those people living their lives, going to work, coming home, existing in ways that had nothing to do with me or Nathan or what had just happened in that boardroom. My life was ending, and nobody else even knew. When we got back to the apartment, Nathan went straight to his office, didn't say anything, just walked down the hall and closed the door behind him. I stood in the entryway for a moment, looking at that closed door, listening to the silence. Then I went to the kitchen, made dinner, grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, a salad with the organic greens Nathan preferred. I set the table for two, knowing he wouldn't come out to eat, knowing I'd be sitting there alone. I ate by myself, cleaned up by myself, put the leftovers in containers, and stored them in the refrigerator. Then I sat on the couch, our expensive, uncomfortable couch that Nathan had chosen because it looked good, not because it was comfortable, not because I liked it, but because it looked impressive. I sat there in the dim light from the city coming through the windows, scrolling through my phone, pretending I was reading something, pretending I was fine. At 10:15, my phone buzzed. A text message from Nathan, even though he was 30 feet away behind his office door. File the Morgan contract revisions. Need them by morning. Not a question, not a request, a command. Like I was his employee, like I existed to do his work for him. I stared at that message for a long time, read it over and over, felt something cold settle in my chest. Then I stood up, walked down the hall, knocked on his office door. "Come in," he called. I opened the door. Nathan was sitting at his desk, laptop open, papers spread out everywhere. He didn't look up when I walked in. "I'm done," I said. He glanced up, distracted, annoyed that I was interrupting. "With the contract?" he asked. "Already?" "No," I said. "With this. With you. I'm done, Nathan." His face changed when I said those words. "I'm done with you." For a second, Nathan just stared at me like he was trying to process what I'd said, like the words didn't quite make sense. Then his expression shifted from confusion to irritation, the same look he'd give when a contractor missed a deadline or an investor asked too many questions. "Sarah, I don't have time for this right now," he said. His voice was dismissive. He turned back to his laptop. "Whatever you're upset about, we can talk about it later. I have work to do." "No," I said. We can't talk about it later because there is no later. I'm leaving you, Nathan. Don't ever come near me again. That got his attention. He looked up, really looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something other than indifference in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or confusion, like he genuinely couldn't understand why I would say something like that. You're upset about this morning, he said slowly. The pen thing, that's what this is about. The pen thing. He called it the pen thing, like it was nothing. Like humiliating me in front of his entire executive team was just a minor incident that I was overreacting to. It's about 6 years of being invisible, I said. My voice was steady. 6 years of being treated like I'm less than. 6 years of watching you take credit for work I did. Connections I made. Ideas I gave you. Nathan's jaw tightened. I built this company, he said. Everything we have is because of me. No, I said quietly. Everything you have is because of me, and you're about to find out exactly how much. His eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. I just turned around and walked out of his office, closed the door behind me. I could hear him calling after me. Sarah, get back here. We're not done talking about this. But we were done. We'd been done for a long time. I just hadn't admitted it to myself until today. I went to our bedroom, locked the door. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, not from sadness, from adrenaline, from energy, from something I hadn't felt in years. I felt awake. For 6 years, I'd been sleepwalking through my life, going through the motions, pretending everything was fine, telling myself that things would get better, that Nathan would eventually see me again, value me again, treat me like a partner instead of an accessory. But he wouldn't. He never would. Because to him, I wasn't a person anymore. I was just part of the machinery that kept his life running smoothly. And I was done being that. I went to my closet, pulled out a small suitcase from the top shelf, the one I used for weekend trips, started packing. Not everything, just essentials. Clothes, toiletries, the things I'd need for a few days. Then I went to my desk, the small desk in the corner of our bedroom that Nathan had let me have because it didn't take up too much space. I opened my laptop, not the one Nathan had bought me, not the one that was connected to all his accounts and his cloud storage, my personal laptop, the one I'd bought with money from consulting work I'd done on the side, work Nathan didn't even know about. I opened a folder I'd labeled Documentation. Inside were files I'd been quietly collecting for 8 months, since the day I realized my marriage was over and started thinking about what came next. 2 years ago, Mitchell Dynamics had nearly collapsed. The company was bleeding money. Investors were threatening to pull out. Clients were leaving. Nathan had been terrified, completely overwhelmed. He'd come home every night looking like he was on the edge of a breakdown. And I'd fixed it. I'd restructured the entire financial system, gone through every expense, every contract, every revenue stream. I'd identified where money was being wasted, found cost overruns nobody else had noticed, created new projections, built models that actually worked. I'd saved his company, and I'd been smart about it. Every email I sent, every memo I wrote, every financial decision I made, I kept copies. My name was in all of them, buried in metadata, hidden in CC lines, documented in ways Nathan never bothered to check because he didn't understand the technical side of things. I had proof. Proof that I'd done the work. Proof that Nathan had taken credit for it. Proof that without me, Mitchell Dynamics would have gone under. But the files weren't the real power. The real power was in the relationships. Over the years, I'd built connections Nathan didn't even know about. I'd helped people, made myself valuable, Not as Mrs. Nathan Mitchell, but as Sarah, as someone competent and trustworthy and reliable. And now I was going to use every single one of those relationships. I picked up my phone, looked at the time, 10:43. Late, but not too late. Not for what I needed to do. I made the first call. Thomas Riley answered on the third ring. Sarah. His voice was warm, friendly. It's late. Everything okay? Thomas was the venture capitalist who'd funded Nathan's expansion, $25 million, the money that had turned Mitchell Dynamics from a struggling development company into a major player. But Thomas hadn't invested because of Nathan. He'd invested because of me, because I'd worked with him in Seattle, because he trusted me, because I'd connected him with 3 other deals after that had made him a fortune. I need you to pull your funding from Mitchell Dynamics, I said. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, thinking. That's substantial, he said finally. Can I ask why? I could have explained. I could have told him about the pen, about the laughter, about 6 years of being erased. But I didn't need to explain. Thomas and I had history. We had trust. Because I'm asking, I said, and because Nathan's been misrepresenting the company's stability. I have documentation. Do you want me to send it over? Or do you trust me? Another pause, longer this time. I trust you, Thomas said. I'll initiate withdrawal proceedings first thing tomorrow. Thank you, Thomas. I hung up, made the second call. Diane Grant answered almost immediately. Sarah, darling, what's wrong? Her voice was full of concern. We'd become real friends over the years. Coffee every few weeks. Long conversations about everything and nothing. She was one of the few people who saw me as myself, not as Nathan's wife. I need you to stall the permits for Nathan's riverfront project, I said. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Sarah, that's his flagship development. If those permits don't go through, the project dies. He loses $18 million in committed investor capital. I know, I said. Silence, then quietly. He did something, didn't he? Yes. Consider it done. The third call was riskier. Robert Ellis, Nathan's CFO, the man who'd sat in that boardroom this morning and laughed when Nathan told me to pick up his pen. Robert was loyal to Nathan, but more than that, Robert was loyal to money, to his own career, to staying on the winning side. He answered on the first ring. Mrs. Mitchell? He sounded confused. Is Nathan okay? Robert, I need to be very clear with you, I said. My voice was calm, steady. Tomorrow morning, Thomas Riley is pulling $25 million in funding. The riverfront permits are being delayed indefinitely, and I'm filing for divorce with a lawsuit claiming intellectual property theft for the financial systems I built that saved the company. I heard him inhale sharply, heard the moment he understood what I was telling him. You're serious, he said, completely. You have 2 choices. You can go down with Nathan, or you can position yourself as the person who salvaged what's left. I'd recommend the second option. Another pause. I could almost hear him calculating, weighing his options, thinking about his career, his reputation, his future. What do you need from me? He asked. Call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Tell them Nathan has been unstable, that you're concerned about his decision-making. Plant the seeds. Can you do that? Yes. I hung up. Check the time. 11:47. I opened my email, started drafting a message to Mitchell Dynamics' entire board of directors. People Nathan had spent years courting, people who trusted me because I'd been at every charity gala, every investor dinner, every corporate event. The gracious, competent wife who made Nathan look stable and grounded. I kept the email simple, professional, devastating. Dear board members, It is with great concern that I must inform you of serious financial irregularities and mismanagement within Mitchell Dynamics that have come to my attention. I've attached documentation for your review and urge immediate action to protect shareholder interests. Sincerely, Sarah Mitchell. I attached the files, evidence of Nathan's inflated projections, risky investments he'd hidden from the board, tax shortcuts that weren't quite illegal, but weren't quite legal either. I hit send at 11:59. Then I opened a new email, this one to Olivia Reed, the VP of Acquisitions, the woman who'd laughed the hardest this morning. Olivia, you should know that Nathan has been telling investors you're the weak link in the company. Thought you'd want to see the documentation. I attached emails I'd fabricated, forged in Nathan's writing style, made to look like he'd been planning to fire her, blame her for any failures, use her as a scapegoat. I sent it at 12:03 in the morning. Then I turned off my phone, closed my laptop, got into bed, and for the first time in 6 years, I slept deeply, peacefully, without the weight of pretending everything was fine pressing down on my chest. I woke up Wednesday morning to silence, but it wasn't the usual silence. This was different, heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I could feel something building, even though I couldn't hear it yet. I got out of bed, walked to the kitchen, made coffee. The apartment looked exactly the same as it always did. Plain, expensive, but something fundamental had shifted. The life I'd been living here was over. I just hadn't left yet. I got dressed carefully, put on my navy Armani suit, the one I'd bought for myself 2 years ago, not one of the dresses Nathan picked out. Not one of the outfits he chose because they made me look appropriate for his business events. This was mine. I'd bought it with money I'd earned from consulting work Nathan didn't even know about. I made myself breakfast, toast, eggs, sat at the kitchen counter, and ate slowly, drank my coffee, waited. At 7:23, Nathan's office door slammed open. The sound echoed through the apartment, loud, violent, nothing like the careful, controlled way Nathan usually moved through spaces. He appeared in the hallway, and I barely recognized him. His hair was sticking up at odd angles, like he'd been running his hands through it all night. His shirt was wrinkled, the same shirt he'd been wearing yesterday. He hadn't changed, hadn't slept. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild. His face was pale. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck. "What did you do?" His voice shook. Not with anger, with fear. Raw, undisguised fear. I took a slow sip of my coffee, let the silence stretch between us. Let him stand there in the hallway, disheveled and panicking, while I sat calmly at the counter. "I picked up your pen, Nathan," I said finally. "Remember?" His face went completely white. "Riley pulled the funding," he said. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been talking all night, or maybe screaming. "Grant blocked the permits. The board called an emergency meeting. They're questioning me about financial irregularities. Olivia is threatening to sue me. Robert is talking about a vote of no confidence." He was listing catastrophes one after another, like he couldn't quite believe they were all happening at the same time. I set my coffee cup down carefully. "Sounds like you're having a rough morning. You did this." It wasn't a question. His eyes were locked on mine, desperate, searching for some sign that this was a mistake, that I'd fix it, that I'd save him like I always had. "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "I just stopped holding everything together. Turns out without me, your empire is made of paper." His phone started buzzing on the desk in his office. We could both hear it from where we were, loud, insistent. It didn't stop, just kept buzzing and buzzing. Nathan looked toward his office, then back at me. His face was doing something strange, crumpling, like he was finally understanding what was happening. He walked quickly back to his office. I heard him pick up his phone, heard him make a sound. Something between a gasp and a groan. He came back to the hallway, holding his phone, staring at the screen. 53 missed calls, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. You should probably answer those, I observed, though I doubt any of them are good news. He just stood there looking at me, really looking at me, like he was seeing me for the first time in years. You can't do this, he said. We built this together. No, I corrected. My voice was calm, steady. I built it. You took credit. There's a difference. His mouth opened, closed. He looked like he wanted to say something, argue, defend himself, but nothing came out. The apartment intercom crackled. The doorman's voice came through. Professional. Careful. Mr. Mitchell, there are 2 gentlemen here from the Securities and Exchange Commission. They're asking to speak with you. Should I send them up? Nathan's face lost what little color it had left. I picked up my purse from the counter, walked toward the door. Where are you going? Nathan's voice cracked. He panicked. I turned back one last time, looked at him standing there in the hallway. This man I'd been married to for 6 years. This man who'd promised we'd build something together. This man who'd reduced me to furniture and then wondered why I stopped caring. Anywhere but here, I said. Good luck explaining to the SEC how you've been managing the company, Nathan. I'm sure they'll find your methods fascinating. I walked out, closed the door behind me. On the foyer table by the door, I left my wedding ring right next to yesterday's mail that nobody had bothered to open. The elevator ride down felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years, like I'd been underwater and finally broke the surface. When I got to the lobby, 2 men in dark suits were waiting by the doorman's desk, SEC investigators. They looked exactly like you'd expect. Professional, serious, carrying briefcases. They glanced at me as I walked past. Didn't recognize me. Why would they? I was just some woman leaving the building. Nobody important. I walked out onto the street. The morning air was cool, clear. The city was already awake. People rushing to work. Cars honking. The normal chaos of a Wednesday morning. And I was free. I spent the rest of that day at a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the apartment. Sat in the back corner with my laptop. Watched the news unfold on my phone. By 10 in the morning, financial blogs were reporting that Mitchell Dynamics was in crisis. Major venture capital withdrawal, permits blocked on flagship development, emergency board meeting called stock dropping. By noon, major investors were putting out statements, distancing themselves from Nathan, expressing concern about management practices, protecting their own reputations. By 3 in the afternoon, the company's stock had dropped 40%. I sat there reading article after article, watching Nathan's empire crumble in real time, and I waited to feel guilty, waited for regret to hit me, waited to feel like I'd done something terrible. But all I felt was relief. That evening, I checked into a hotel. Nothing fancy, just a clean, quiet place in Midtown where nobody knew who I was. The kind of hotel business travelers use, anonymous, forgettable. I ordered room service, took a long bath, got into the clean white sheets, and slept for 12 hours straight. Deep, dreamless sleep, the kind I hadn't had in years. When I woke up Thursday morning, my phone was full of notifications. 89 missed calls, 143 text messages. Most were from Nathan, dozens of them, starting angry, then confused, then desperate, then pleading. A few were from his lawyers, professional, formal, requesting that I contact them immediately regarding urgent legal matters. 3 were from old friends who'd seen the news, asking if I was okay, if there was anything they could do. And 1 was from my sister Emily. She lived 2 hours upstate. We talked every few weeks. She'd never liked Nathan. had told me years ago that something felt wrong about my marriage. I hadn't listened. Her text was simple. I saw the news. Are you safe? Call me. I called her. I'm fine, I said when she answered. Better than fine, actually. Emily was quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing, processing. What did he do, Sarah? She asked finally. He forgot I was a person. Good for you, Emily said. Her voice was firm, proud. Come stay with me for a while. You shouldn't be alone. I thanked her, told her I would, but not yet. I had one more thing to do. That afternoon, I went back to the penthouse. I knew Nathan would be at his emergency board meeting, trying to salvage what was left of his company, trying to explain how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The doorman looked at me when I walked in. His expression was careful, sympathetic, like he felt sorry for me. Poor Mrs. Mitchell. Her husband's company is collapsing. She must be devastated. He let me up without questions. The apartment felt different now, like a museum, a display of a life that had never really existed. I moved quickly, went to the bedroom, pulled out my largest suitcase, started packing clothes, my personal items, the things that actually mattered to me. I left behind everything Nathan had bought, all the designer dresses, the expensive jewelry, the accessories that were meant to make me look appropriate for his world. I didn't want any of it. On my way out, I stopped in Nathan's office. The desk was covered in papers. His laptop was still open. I could see his email on the screen. Message after message, all marked urgent, all from people who were angry or panicking or demanding explanations. I sat down in his leather chair, the expensive one he'd special ordered, the one I'd never been allowed to sit in because it was his space, his sanctuary. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a folder labeled Sarah Personal. I pulled it out, opened it. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. A prenuptial agreement. But I didn't remember signing a prenuptial agreement. We'd talked about it before the wedding. Nathan's lawyer had suggested it. But I thought we'd decided against it. I thought we were partners who trusted each other. Life insurance policies with Nathan listed as the sole beneficiary, all of them policies I didn't know existed. And a letter dated 6 months ago from Nathan's lawyer outlining steps to protect assets in the event of marital dissolution. He'd been planning this, planning to leave me, planning to make sure I got nothing when he did. I took out my phone, photographed every page, every document, every piece of evidence that Nathan had been preparing to throw me away with nothing. Then I put the folder back exactly where I'd found it, closed the drawer, and on my way out, I took the Mont Blanc pen from his desk. The expensive one, the one that had started everything. I put it in my purse and walked out of that apartment for the last time. The next 2 weeks moved in a strange rhythm. Days felt both endless and impossibly fast. I'd wake up in my hotel room, check my phone, see dozens of new messages. Lawyers, reporters, people I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanting to know if I was okay. I hired a lawyer. Her name was Rachel Carter. She came highly recommended by Thomas Riley. Direct, the kind of woman who didn't waste time on pleasantries. We met at her office in Manhattan the Friday after everything started falling apart. She had the documents I'd sent her spread across her conference table. Financial records, emails, contracts. She'd been going through them for 2 days. "This is airtight," she said, without preamble. "Nathan Mitchell has been taking credit for work you did, using connections you made, building a company on your labor while keeping you completely off the paperwork. We can prove intellectual property theft, financial exploitation, potentially fraud." "What about him?" I asked. "What happens to Nathan?" Rachel looked at me carefully. "He's finished. The board suspended him this morning, pending investigation. Robert Ellis called an emergency meeting yesterday, voted 7-2 to remove Nathan from active leadership. I felt something settle in my chest. Not quite satisfaction, just confirmation that what I'd set in motion was working. Olivia Reed went to the press, Rachel continued. She's claiming workplace toxicity, financial mismanagement. She's furious about emails she received that made it look like Nathan was planning to fire her. I kept my face neutral, said nothing. Rachel smiled slightly, like she knew exactly what I'd done, but wasn't going to ask. Thomas Riley's withdrawal triggered a cascade, she went on. 3 other investors pulled out. Creditors are calling in loans. The riverfront project collapsed completely. Mitchell Dynamics is imploding. Good, I said quietly. Rachel leaned back in her chair. The press wants to talk to you. Everyone wants to know where you are, what you know, what you're planning to do. What should I say? Nothing. Let Nathan bury himself. He's giving interviews, blaming everyone except himself, making excuses. The more he talks, the worse he looks. You stay quiet, stay dignified. When the time comes, we let the fact speak. So that's what I did. I gave one statement. Short, professional. I'm cooperating fully with investigators and look forward to the truth coming to light. That was it. Nothing more. Meanwhile, Nathan gave 3 different interviews over the next week. I watched them from my hotel room, each one more desperate than the last. In the first interview, he claimed the company's collapse was due to external market forces, bad timing, unforeseen circumstances. He made himself sound like a victim of bad luck. In the second interview, he started blaming specific people. Robert had mismanaged finances. Olivia had made poor acquisition decisions. The investors had panicked unnecessarily. By the third interview, he looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted. He rambled, contradicted himself, blamed me briefly but then backtracked when the interviewer pushed back. It was painful to watch. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because I could see exactly what Rachel had predicted. Nathan was destroying himself every time he opened his mouth. But not everything went the way I'd planned. 2 weeks after I'd left the apartment, I got a call from an unknown number. I was at the hotel eating takeout, watching the news coverage of Mitchell Dynamics' continued collapse. I almost didn't answer. I'd been getting calls constantly from reporters, from people who wanted inside information, from old acquaintances suddenly concerned about my well-being. But something made me pick up. Mrs. Mitchell? The voice was male, professional. Yes. My name is Daniel Foster. I'm an investigative journalist with the New York Times. I'm working on a piece about Mitchell Dynamics and your husband. I'd like to speak with you if you're willing. I hesitated. Rachel had told me not to talk to the press. I'm not giving interviews, I said. I understand, Daniel said quickly. And I respect that. But I think you'll want to hear what I found. It's about your husband's original business partner, a man named Victor Sanchez. The name hit me like cold water. Victor Sanchez, Nathan's first partner, the man who'd been there at the beginning, who'd helped start Mitchell Dynamics, who'd left the company under circumstances Nathan never wanted to discuss. I'd asked about Victor once early in our marriage. Nathan had shut down completely, said it was complicated, said Victor had made poor decisions and had to leave, said it was in the past and didn't matter anymore. I'd never asked again. What about him? I asked Daniel carefully. He died 2 years ago, Daniel said. Car accident. But before he died, he told his wife that Nathan had stolen his share of the company, used fraudulent contracts to push him out. She's been trying to get someone to investigate for years, but nobody would listen until now. I sat down on the hotel bed, my takeout forgotten. Why are you telling me this? Because Victor's widow deserves justice, Daniel said. And because I think you're the only person who has access to the financial records that could prove what Nathan did. Will you meet with me? I thought about it. About what Rachel would say, about the risk of talking to a journalist while everything was still so volatile. But I also thought about Victor Sanchez, about a man who'd been erased from the company he'd helped build, about a widow who'd spent years trying to get someone to listen. It sounded familiar. Where? I asked. We met the next day at a diner in Queens, far from Manhattan, far from anywhere Nathan or his people would think to look for me. Daniel Foster was younger than I'd expected, mid-30s maybe, rumpled suit, tired eyes, the kind of person who looked like they took their work seriously, who cared about getting the story right. He had a folder with him, thick, full of documents. He spread them across the table between us. Contracts, emails, financial statements. Victor Sanchez and Nathan Mitchell started Mitchell Dynamics together 7 years ago, Daniel explained. They were equal partners, 50-50 split. They built the company from nothing. I looked at the documents, saw Victor's name on the original incorporation papers, right next to Nathan's. Equal partners, just like Nathan had promised me we'd be. 2 years in, the company started growing, Daniel continued. They needed more capital. Nathan convinced Victor to restructure the ownership, said it would make them more attractive to investors. Victor agreed to sign over his shares temporarily in exchange for a payout that was supposed to come from future profits. But it didn't, I said quietly. No, Daniel confirmed. Nathan structured the deal so the profits got funneled into a separate company, an LLC that Victor had no access to. By the time Victor realized what was happening, he'd been completely locked out. He spent 3 years trying to fight it. But Nathan had better lawyers, more money, more connections. And Victor, he died broke, Daniel said. Bitter. His wife Carmen said he'd been broken by what happened, that he trusted Nathan completely, that the betrayal destroyed him. I stared at the documents, at Victor's signature on contracts that had stolen his own company from him. Nathan had done this before, to someone who trusted him, who'd helped him build something from nothing. He'd done it to Victor, and then he'd done it to me. Why didn't anyone investigate? I asked. Carmen tried, Daniel said. She went to lawyers, to reporters, to anyone who would listen. But Nathan's reputation was spotless by then. He was the successful CEO, the visionary. Carmen was just a bitter widow who couldn't accept that her husband had made bad business decisions. Nobody took her seriously. Until now. Until now, Daniel agreed. Because now Nathan's reputation is falling apart, and people are starting to ask questions about how he really built his company, about who he really is. He looked at me directly. Carmen deserves justice. She deserves to know that her husband was telling the truth, that he wasn't bitter or incompetent, that he was stolen from. What do you need from me? I asked. Financial records, Daniel said. From when you restructured the company 2 years ago. I need proof that Nathan's been hiding profits, misrepresenting the company's structure. If you have access to the original contracts with Victor, that would help too. I did have access. I had everything. Every file from the restructuring, every document Nathan had given me when the company was collapsing and he needed me to save it. I'll help, I said. But I want to meet Carmen first, and I want to make sure she gets what she's owed before anything else happens. Daniel nodded. I'll arrange it. 3 days later, I met Carmen Sanchez in her apartment in Brooklyn. She lived in a small 2-bedroom, clean but worn. The furniture was old. The walls needed paint. But there were photos everywhere. Of her daughters, of Victor, of a family that had been happy once. Carmen was in her early 40s, tired but strong. She had lines around her eyes, gray in her hair, the look of someone who'd been fighting for a long time and refused to give up. When I told her I had documents that could prove what Nathan had done to Victor, she cried. Not happy tears, not relief, just exhaustion, like she'd been holding something heavy for years and could finally put it down. I knew Victor was telling the truth, she said. Her voice was thick. But nobody would believe me. They said he was bitter, that he couldn't accept his own failures. But I knew. We sat at her small kitchen table, went through documents, built a case. And as we worked, I realized something. Nathan hadn't just stolen from Victor. He'd stolen from me too. He'd used my work, my connections, my ideas. He'd built his empire on other people's labor and called it his own genius. Carmen and I filed a joint lawsuit 2 weeks later, her for fraud and wrongful death, me for intellectual property theft and financial exploitation. The press coverage was immediate. Headlines everywhere. Mitchell's house of cards collapses, the women who brought down a CEO. But the one I kept coming back to was Daniel's article in the Times, the pen that started it all, how Sarah Mitchell dismantled an empire. Daniel's article in the Times came out on a Monday morning. I read it in my hotel room with my coffee, sitting by the window overlooking the city. The headline was simple, direct. He'd written it carefully, factually. Every claim backed by documentation, every accusation supported by evidence. He'd interviewed Carmen, talked to former employees, spoken with investors who'd pulled their funding, and he told the truth about Victor Sanchez, about how Nathan had stolen from his own partner, about how Carmen had spent years trying to get someone to listen. The article went viral within hours. By noon, it was the most read piece on the Times website. By evening, every major news outlet was covering it. Financial networks, business journals, even mainstream media picked it up because the story had everything people loved. Betrayal, revenge, a powerful man brought down by the woman he'd underestimated. My phone started ringing constantly again. Reporters wanting comments, talk shows wanting interviews, people I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly reaching out. I ignored all of it. Let Rachel handle the press inquiries. The lawsuit moved faster than I'd expected. Rachel had warned me that these things usually took months, sometimes years. But with the documentation I'd provided and Carmen's testimony, Nathan's lawyers had nothing to work with. The evidence was overwhelming. Fraudulent contracts with Victor Sanchez, financial misrepresentation to the board, tax strategies that crossed the line into evasion, and intellectual property theft. My work, my connections, my strategies, all documented, all provable. Nathan's lawyers tried to argue. They claimed the contracts with Victor were legitimate business decisions, that the financial restructuring I'd done was part of my role as Nathan's wife, that there was no clear line between marital partnership and professional contribution. But Rachel tore those arguments apart. She had emails where I'd explicitly outlined strategies, memos with my name on them, documentation showing that I'd been the one communicating with investors and city officials, financial models with my digital signature in the metadata. The board of Mitchell Dynamics voted to remove Nathan as CEO in late November. 7 votes in favor, 2 against. Robert Ellis was installed as interim head. His job was to salvage whatever was left of the company, to try to rebuild trust with creditors and clients. It was too late. The damage was done. Olivia Reed resigned 2 days after Nathan was removed. She took a position at a competing firm, but before she left, she gave an interview to a business podcast, talked about Nathan's toxic leadership, his ethical bankruptcy, how he'd created a culture where loyalty mattered more than competence. She never mentioned the fabricated emails I'd sent her, never acknowledged that her anger at Nathan might have been based on false information. She just used the opportunity to position herself as someone who'd seen through him all along. I felt nothing about that. Olivia had laughed when Nathan told me to pick up his pen. She'd been complicit in my humiliation. Whatever happened to her career after this was her own problem. Tyler Brooks disappeared from public life entirely, deleted his social media, stopped posting about marketing strategies and personal branding. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he'd moved to Portland, was working for a small startup, trying to rebuild away from the wreckage of Mitchell Dynamics. Chloe was let go when the company downsized, just another casualty of Nathan's collapse. I wondered sometimes if she understood what had happened, if she'd learned anything about loyalty and complicity. But I didn't wonder for long. She wasn't my concern anymore. Nathan hired a crisis management firm, tried to control the narrative. They put out statements claiming he was the victim of a vindictive ex-wife, that I was bitter about the divorce, and had manufactured evidence, that the journalists covering the story were biased against successful men. But nobody was buying it anymore. The facade had cracked completely. Everyone could see what was underneath. A man who'd built his success on theft and manipulation, who'd stolen from his partner, from his wife, from everyone who'd trusted him. In early December, Rachel called me. "The judge ruled in your favor," she said. Her voice was calm, professional, but I could hear satisfaction underneath. "Nathan has to pay you $12 million in restitution for intellectual property theft, plus half the marital assets. Carmen's case is still pending, but it's looking very strong. $12 million, half the marital assets." I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. This was what I'd wanted. Proof that I'd been right. That Nathan had stolen from me. That everything I'd done to bring him down was justified. But mostly, I just felt tired. "What about Nathan?" I asked. "What happens to him now?" Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said bluntly, "He's broke. The company's being liquidated to pay creditors and legal fees. Whatever's left will go to settlements. He's facing potential criminal charges for fraud, and his reputation is destroyed. He won't work in this industry again." I thought about the man I'd married 7 years ago, the one who'd been charming and ambitious and full of dreams, the one who'd promised we'd build something together. That man was gone. Maybe he'd never really existed. Maybe I just wanted him to exist so badly that I'd imagined qualities that weren't there. "Good," I said quietly. "He earned it." But there was one more thing I needed to do. I called Nathan's mother. Dorothy Mitchell had always been kind to me, even when Nathan wasn't, even when our marriage was falling apart and I was becoming invisible in my own life. She'd check in occasionally, ask how I was doing, invite me to family gatherings that Nathan was too busy to attend. She deserved to hear the truth from me, not from the press, not from Nathan's version of events. We met at a small cafe in Connecticut, near the house where she'd raised Nathan, where he'd grown up believing the world would give him everything he wanted. Dorothy looked older than I remembered. Her face was lined with worry. Her hair had more gray in it. She moved carefully, like someone carrying weight they couldn't put down. We sat at a corner table, ordered coffee. She held her cup with both hands, didn't drink. "I don't understand what happened," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, confused. "Nathan was always so driven, so ambitious. I thought you two were happy." I took a breath, chose my words carefully. "Dorothy, Nathan built his success by stealing from people. From Victor Sanchez, his original partner, from me, from everyone who trusted him. I know he's your son. I know this is hard to hear, but he did this to himself." She was silent for a long time, just stared at her coffee. Her hands trembled slightly. Then very softly she said, "I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to see it." She looked up at me, Her eyes were wet. When Nathan was young, he was so charming. Everyone loved him. But there was always this other side, this need to win, to be the best, to prove something. His father pushed him so hard, expected so much. I think Nathan learned early that the only thing that mattered was success, no matter how you got it. She reached across the table, took my hand. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry he hurt you. You deserved better. You deserved so much better. That conversation gave me something I hadn't expected. Closure. Not with Nathan. I'd never get that. But with the life I'd left behind. With the version of myself who'd believed in partnership and promises and building something together. Dorothy and I stayed in touch after that. She'd call every few weeks, check in. We'd talk about small things, books we were reading, shows we were watching, normal things that had nothing to do with Nathan or lawsuits or collapsed empires. She became an unexpected ally, someone who understood the complicated grief of losing someone who was still alive, but completely unrecognizable. By January, everything was finalized. Carmen received $8 million, enough to pay off her mortgage, to secure her daughter's college educations, to honor Victor's memory by proving he'd been telling the truth all along. I received my restitution, $12 million, plus half of what Nathan and I had accumulated during our marriage, which wasn't much after the legal fees and the company's liquidation, but it was enough. I filed for divorce. The paperwork was straightforward. Nathan didn't fight it, didn't contest anything, just signed where his lawyer told him to sign. He'd moved out of the penthouse into a small apartment in New Jersey. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was working as a consultant for a mid-level real estate firm, making maybe a tenth of what he used to make. His face had disappeared from magazines, from conference stages, from business news. He'd become ordinary, forgettable, just another person trying to make a living. Me? I started planning my next chapter. I didn't know exactly what it would look like yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. It would be mine. Fully, completely, unmistakably mine. No one would take credit for my work. No one would reduce me to an accessory. No one would make me invisible ever again. The Mont Blanc pen still sat on the desk in my hotel room. I looked at it sometimes. This expensive object that had started everything. I kept it not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that small moments of disrespect can break everything. That the person everyone underestimates might be the one holding all the power. And that sometimes picking up the pen is the last thing you'll ever do for someone who doesn't deserve you. In February, I moved out of the hotel and into a small apartment in Brooklyn. Nothing like the Chicago penthouse. This place had old hardwood floors that creaked, windows that looked out onto a tree-lined street instead of Lake Michigan, a kitchen where I could actually cook instead of just heat up takeout. It was mine. Really mine. I'd signed the lease myself, paid the deposit with my own money, chose the furniture because I liked it, not because it looked impressive. For the first time in 6 years, I was building a life that belonged to me. I'd been thinking about starting my own consulting firm since December, since the day Rachel told me the settlement was going through, since I realized I had the money and the freedom and the expertise to do exactly what I wanted. I didn't want to work for someone else, didn't want to rebuild someone else's company or make someone else look good. I wanted to build something that was unmistakably mine. I called it Riley Strategic Partners, named after Thomas Riley, the venture capitalist who'd pulled his funding from Nathan when I asked, who trusted me without question, who'd believed in me when it mattered most. Thomas agreed to be an advisor. So did Diane Grant, the city planner who'd stalled Nathan's permits, and 2 other colleagues I'd worked with over the years, people who knew what I was capable of, who'd seen my work firsthand. My first client came through a referral from Thomas, a small real estate firm in Seattle. They were struggling with cash flow, bleeding money in ways they couldn't track. Exactly the kind of problem I'd solved for Nathan years ago. I spent 6 weeks with them, went through their entire financial structure, found where money was being wasted, identified revenue streams they hadn't noticed, restructured their accounting systems, helped them secure new funding from a local bank. Within 2 months, they were profitable again. Word spread quickly after that. By April, I had 6 clients. By June, I had 12. Small firms, mostly companies that had heard about the woman who'd actually built Mitchell Dynamics, who wanted someone who understood business from the ground up, who'd proven she could turn struggling companies around. And this time, my name was on everything. Every contract had my signature. Every proposal had my name at the top. Every success story credited Sarah Mitchell, CEO of Riley Strategic Partners. It felt strange at first, surreal. I'd spent so many years being invisible that seeing my own name in print felt like looking at someone else's life. But slowly, it started to feel normal, natural. This was who I'd always been. I just hadn't had the space to show it before. Not everything was smooth, though. There were hard days, moments when I wondered if I'd made the right choice, nights when I lay awake thinking about everything that had happened, everything I'd destroyed to get here. In March, my sister Emily came to visit. She took the train down from upstate. We met for dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, the kind of place with red checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. Comfortable, unpretentious. We ordered wine, pasta, sat in a corner booth where we could talk without being overheard. Emily had been supportive through everything. She'd offered to let me stay with her when I left Nathan, called me every week to check in, never once suggested I should have handled things differently. But that night, over our second glass of wine, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you ever regret it?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. Emily was 3 years older than me, had been married to the same man for 15 years, had 2 kids in a house in the suburbs and a life that looked nothing like mine. I thought about her question, turned it over in my mind, examined it from different angles. "I regret marrying someone who didn't see me," I said finally. "But I don't regret leaving. And I don't regret what I did to his company. He built it on lies and stolen work. All I did was stop propping it up." Emily nodded slowly. "You know people are going to judge you, right? They're going to say you were vindictive, that you destroyed him out of spite." "Let them," I said. "I know the truth. The people who matter know the truth. That's enough." But Emily's words stayed with me after she left. Because she was right. Some people did judge me. A few old friends stopped calling, people I'd known for years who suddenly became too busy to meet for coffee, who stopped responding to messages, who clearly didn't want to be associated with the scandal. Some business contacts distanced themselves too, uncomfortable with the mess, with the lawsuits and the press coverage and the very public destruction of Nathan's reputation. But for every person who turned away, 2 more reached out. Women mostly, who'd been in similar situations, who'd been overlooked at work, undervalued by partners, erased from their own accomplishments. They saw my story and recognized their own. They reached out to tell me they understood, that they'd been there too, that seeing someone finally fight back had given them courage to do the same. One of those women was Irene Caldwell. She emailed me in March, said she'd read Daniel's article in the Times, asked if we could meet for coffee. We met at a cafe in Midtown on a Thursday afternoon. Irene was in her early 40s, well-dressed, the kind of woman who looked like she had everything together. But when she started talking, I heard the exhaustion underneath. The years of fighting, the frustration of not being believed. I was the CTO of a tech startup, Irene told me. My co-founder and I built it together. I designed all the core technology, the algorithms, the user interface, everything that made the product work. But he was the face of the company, the one who talked to investors and did the press interviews. She paused, took a sip of her coffee. 2 years in, he pushed me out, restructured the company, gave himself majority control, took my name off the patents. I spent the next 5 years trying to get people to see what he'd done, but nobody wanted to listen. They said I was bitter, that I couldn't accept his success. I knew exactly what she meant. I'd heard the same things about Victor Sanchez's widow, about women who tried to claim credit for work men had stolen. It wasn't until I saw your story, Irene continued, that I realized I wasn't crazy. He really did steal from me, and I wasn't wrong to be angry about it. We talked for 3 hours that day, shared stories, compared notes on how men like Nathan operated, how they took and took and took, while making you feel like you should be grateful they let you be part of their success. Irene and I became friends after that. Real friends, the kind who understood each other without explanation. In May, I asked her to join Riley Strategic Partners as a partner. She brought her own clients, her own expertise in technology and startups, her own story of resilience. Together, we started building something bigger than either of us could have built alone. We didn't just solve business problems. We actively sought out women and marginalized founders who'd been erased from their own success stories, who'd had their work stolen, their contributions minimized, their names removed from the narrative. We helped them document their contributions, reclaim their credit, tell their stories in ways that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. By summer, we'd worked with 7 founders, helped them get their names back on patents, negotiate better equity splits, secure proper recognition for work they'd actually done. It felt like justice. Not just for me, for everyone who'd been made invisible by someone else's ambition. In August, I got an email that surprised me. It was from Chloe, Nathan's former assistant, the one who'd giggled when he told me to pick up the pen. Hi, Sarah. I know this is probably strange to hear from me after everything that happened, but I wanted to apologize. I laughed that day in the boardroom when Nathan told you to pick up the pen. I didn't think about what it meant. I didn't think about how it must have felt. I was so focused on keeping my job, on staying in Nathan's good graces, that I forgot to be a decent person. I'm sorry. I hope you're doing well. You deserve better than what he gave you. I stared at the email for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, to ignore her, to let her sit with her guilt and her belated understanding. But another part of me, the part that was slowly learning to let go, decided to respond. Thank you for the apology, I wrote back. It means more than you know. I hope you're doing well too. We didn't become friends, didn't start having coffee or keeping in touch. But the exchange gave me something unexpected. Proof that people could change, that moments of cruelty didn't have to define someone forever, that growth was possible even for people who'd been complicit in someone else's harm. I was learning that revenge wasn't just about destruction, it was about reclaiming your story, building something better, and leaving space for grace, not for the people who had hurt you, but for yourself. By October, nearly a year after that Tuesday morning in the boardroom, my life had transformed into something I barely recognized, not because it was worse, but because it was mine. I was living in Brooklyn now, a modest 2-bedroom apartment on a quiet street lined with oak trees. Nothing like the Chicago penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive emptiness. This place had character. The hardwood floors creaked when you walked across them, the radiator clanked in the mornings, the kitchen was small, but functional. I actually cooked there, made breakfast, tried new recipes on weekends. I'd painted the walls colors I liked. Soft blue in the bedroom, warm gray in the living room. Put up artwork that meant something to me instead of pieces chosen because they looked impressive. The furniture was comfortable, lived in, the kind of couch you could actually sit on without worrying about ruining something expensive. I had a small office in the second bedroom, desk by the window, bookshelves filled with actual books I'd read, not leather-bound collections bought by the foot to look educated, and a balcony, small, just big enough for a chair and a small table. I drank my coffee there every morning, watched the neighborhood wake up, watched people walk their dogs and kids wait for the school bus, and life happened in small, ordinary ways that felt more real than anything I'd experienced in the penthouse. Riley's Strategic Partners was thriving. We had 15 clients now, a small team of 4 employees working with Irene and me. We'd moved into an actual office space. Nothing fancy, just a practical space in a building near Union Square where we could meet with clients and work without being scattered across different departments. We had a reputation now for excellence, for integrity, for being the firm that actually gave credit where it was due. I was getting invited to speak at conferences. Business schools wanted me to talk to their students about entrepreneurship and resilience. Publications asked me to write articles about leadership and partnership and what it really takes to build something that lasts. And every time I spoke, every time I wrote something, I made sure to mention Victor Sanchez, to talk about Carmen and her fight for justice, to remind people that Nathan's downfall wasn't just about me. It was about everyone he'd exploited, everyone he'd stolen from, everyone he'd erased while building his empire on their work. Carmen and I stayed close. We talked every few weeks, met for coffee when I was in her part of Brooklyn. Her daughters were doing well. The older one had started college, studying business. Ironically, wanted to build her own company someday. The younger one was thriving in high school, on the debate team, getting good grades, planning for her own future. Victor would be so proud of them, Carmen told me one afternoon in September. We were sitting in a small cafe near her apartment. She had photos on her phone, showed me pictures of her daughters at college move-in day at a debate competition. He'd be proud of you too, I said, for never giving up, for making sure the truth came out. Carmen smiled, tired but genuine. We did it together. You and I. We made them see what Victor tried to tell them for years. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. Thank you, Sarah, for believing me, for helping us, for giving my girls their father's dignity back. I saw Nathan one more time, completely by accident. It was mid-October, a Tuesday morning. I was at a coffee shop in Midtown, waiting for a meeting with a potential client, sitting at a small table by the window, working on my laptop, drinking an Americano. The door opened. I glanced up out of habit. Nathan walked in. I recognized him immediately, even though he looked different, smaller somehow. His suit was off the rack, good quality but not custom. His posture was different, hunched, like he was trying not to take up too much space. His face looked older, more lines, more gray in his hair. He was staring at his phone, scrolling with the kind of frantic intensity that meant he was avoiding something or looking for something he couldn't find. I could have looked away, could have focused on my laptop and pretended I hadn't seen him, let him get his coffee and leave without ever knowing I was there. But I didn't. I watched him, waited, and eventually he looked up. Our eyes met across the coffee shop. For a moment, neither of us moved, just stared at each other. Two people who'd once shared a life, who'd promised to build something together, who'd destroyed each other instead. Then Nathan walked over. He stopped a few feet from my table, hesitant, like he wasn't sure if I'd let him get closer. Sarah, he said quietly, can we talk? I thought about saying no, Thought about telling him I had nothing to say to him, that we were done, that talking now wouldn't change anything that had happened. But I was curious. After everything, after a year of lawyers and lawsuits and watching his empire crumble, I wanted to know what he'd say. 5 minutes, I said. He sat down across from me, put his phone on the table face down, looked at me directly for the first time in years, really looked at me, not past me, not through me, at me. I'm sorry, he said. For the pen, for all of it. I didn't see what I was doing to you until it was too late. I studied his face, looking for sincerity, for manipulation, for whatever truth might be hiding underneath. I think I found sincerity, buried under exhaustion and regret, and the weight of losing everything. I believe you, I said. But an apology doesn't undo what you did. To me, to Victor, to everyone who trusted you. Nathan nodded. I know. I just needed you to know that. I see it now. What I lost. Who you were. Who I became. He paused, looked down at his hands, then back up at me. Are you happy? He asked. It was such a simple question, but it carried so much weight, so much history. I thought about it, really thought about it. Was I happy? I was still healing, still had moments of anger, moments of sadness, moments when I wondered what might have been if Nathan had been different, if he'd kept his promises, if he'd seen me as a partner instead of a prop. But I also had something I hadn't had in years: freedom. A life that was fully, completely, undeniably mine. I'm getting there, I said honestly. And you? I'm working on it, Nathan said. It's hard losing everything, realizing you were the problem all along, but I'm trying. Therapy, making amends where I can, trying to be better. We didn't part as friends. We didn't hug or exchange phone numbers or promise to stay in touch. We just stood up, nodded at each other, and walked away. Two people who'd once shared a life, now living completely separate ones. And that felt right. Nathan wasn't my responsibility anymore. His redemption, if it came, was his to earn, his journey to take, not mine to facilitate or forgive or validate. I left the coffee shop, walked back toward my office. The October air was cool and clear. The city was busy around,